Hello, my name is Zach Gibbs, and I'm a content developer within education services inside Juniper Networks. And today we will be going through the Paragon Active Assurance Test Templates Learning Byte. Okay, so here we have the example, and in the topology, you might recognize it, but this is the topology I've used for my previous Paragon Active Assurance Learning Bytes, but it's still important to go through with what we're doing today. And so here we have the control center, and the control center, that is the Paragon Active Assurance Control Center, connects into the management network, which then connects into TA1 and TA2, and those are test agents that use ETH0 to reach the management network. And then TA1 and TA2, they connect into the service provider network using ETH1 for both of them. Okay, so with this, what are we trying to do? On the right of the slide, we see some criteria. And what we're trying to do is we need to create a template that will be used for multiple site activation tests for video conferencing. So basically, we're going to create a template, and that template can then be used for tons of different tests. And that helps save time because with templates, you can create static variables that won't need to change. And then you'll have maybe a few dynamic variables that will need to be changed. And that will be changed at every time the template is used with a test. And so with that, let's go through the criteria. We can see here that this is going to be using UDP. And that means that that's probably going to be a static value because this test is always going to use UDP or the tests. And then we have a duration is always set to 30 seconds. Again, that's going to be a static value as well. And then we have criteria that says checks a fixed expected DHCP value of 10. That sounds like another static value. And then a number of flows is always set to 1. Again, another static value. And the thing about static values is the more static values you can set in the template, the less work you're going to have to do later. So try to always set as much static values as possible. And then the full mesh type, or rather the setup is going to be full mesh, and that's another static value. Now, test agents might be different. Now, we only have the 2 test agents in my current setup, but say in the future, we might be adding additional test agents. Say that, the topology only shows the couple test agents here, but maybe we have a bunch of other test agents in different parts of the network. So the test agents might be different. So we need to set that to a dynamic value. The bitrate is always going to be 1 megabit per second. So that sounds like another static value. Then the server port, which is a UDP port, is going to be different as well. Might be different. So we need to set that to a dynamic value. And then lastly, we have the error seconds threshold. They will be set at a fixed values of less than 1% loss, less than 30 milliseconds of jitter, and less than 150 milliseconds of delay. And those, of course, since they are fixed, are going to be static values. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and jump to the Control Center web interface for Paragon Active Assurance and get this going. Okay, so here is the web interface for the Control Center with Paragon Active Assurance, and you can see here we're at the dashboard. And to create a template might seem a little different, but what you have to do is you have to go to create a new test, and then we create a template from that new test we're creating, and then we can use that in additional tests. So with that being said, we could click the Create a New Test button here, or we could select Tests on the side and select the New Test Sequence. And so we'll just select the New Test Sequence. And here we're presented with your standard test, and on the left you can see the sections. Now at the bottom here you see Reflector Base. If we had created any templates before, you'd see the My Templates section added below it. Now, there are no templates with this control center, so there's no My Templates section yet. So with that, what we can do is we can start configuring the test and then select Create Template, or we can just select Create Template and begin creating the template. And so we need to give it a name. We'll call this UDP VoIP LB for Learning Bytes. And then we select UDP since this is going to be using UDP as we talked about. So the first thing we need to do is we need to configure a few things. The duration, remember that was supposed to be 30 seconds. And if we needed to turn that into a dynamic variable, then we'd select the template input option. But we don't need to do that for this field. We'll do that in a little bit, but just wanted to point that out right away. So setting this to 30 and not selecting this checkbox sets it to a static parameter. And so let's go ahead and scroll down a little more. The setup type is full mesh. Again, that is a static parameter, so we don't need to select the template input checkbox. And then clients, that is actually our first dynamic parameter. So we do need to select that checkbox. And then the field changes a little bit. It says input, and we need to select input. There's nothing here right now. And so we need to create a new one. And so we create a new input, and this is going to be a variable that will store the information and then the display name. So we need to name this something unique. Now, you don't have to name it unique, but it's highly recommended as if you need to make another template that uses UDP and you need to make that clients also dynamic, but it's a different template. You want to have unique variables here, so you're not getting mixed up which variable goes to which template or anything like that. We'll call this clients-VoIP, and then on display name, we'll say clients VoIP as well. Then we'll click OK. And notice how that puts it in the input field automatically. So that is in the list. Now, a thing to keep in mind here is we will be setting the port to a dynamic variable as well. But what we have for clients VoIP here will not show up in the list for that dynamic variable. And the reason behind that is clients will have its own little database, and we'll be able to look at the database later as well. And so you won't have to worry about trying to figure out, okay, which one went where. It'll be pretty easy to figure it out as you go. Okay, so number of flows, 1. That's fine. That's a static variable. Rate, set that to 1. That is also a static variable. And then port, that's the server port. We're going to set that to a dynamic variable, selecting that template input checkbox. And then we select input, and we don't have the client VoIP input variable that we set up here. And then we need to create new, and we'll call this port-VoIP. And then display name will be port VoIP. And so we kind of know it goes with this template. You could be a little more specific if you wanted to as well. We'll click OK there, and it selects it by default as well. And we can leave the client port default. We don't need to fill that out. And then loss percentage, we need to set that at 1%. So it'll be anything less than 1% is OK. Jitter, set at 30 milliseconds. And then delay, 150 milliseconds. And then we expect to see a DSCP value of 10. And then we have some additional options we could set, but it's not necessary for this learning byte. We could set the frame size and do not fragment, yes or no, and whatnot. But we're just going to leave those at their defaults. We don't need to change those. And so we click Save to save the template, but do you want to show the edit input? What happens if we click this button? And this shows us the database of all those inputs that we created, those variables. And we can see the variable name, display name of what we created and whatnot. Now, if you didn't name them uniquely, you could change it here. And so that's great. But look at this warning. It does say that changing the variable names in existing templates might break orchestration scripts. So you got to be really careful if you're doing this and you're using orchestration scripts. Basically, if you make a change here, you need to go to the orchestration scripts if you're using them and make that change there as well. So let's go ahead and click OK here. And we didn't need to make any changes, so good to click cancel as well, and that's fine. And then let's save the templates. So let's click save. And then the template has been saved. And if we look on the left in the sections, we can see that My Templates is now available. And then under there, we can see that we have our UDP VoIP LB template, and we could edit, delete, clone that if we wanted to. And so you say you wanted to create a new template based on this template. You could clone it, then edit it, and then make some changes. And so, okay, so we're good. So let's create this test now using this template. So we'll call this our UDP VoIP LB test, and then we need to select the template, and that will add it to the first step. And notice how the template is just a square box. It's not a puzzle piece element. So that means that the template is going to take up just an entire step. Now, we could have added additional steps or parallel tasks to the template, so you can really make it flexible with what you're doing. And then we can add an additional step with additional parallel tasks, or maybe just a straight up square box element for a single step task as well. And so it's very flexible on what you can do. Okay, so then with that, this just looks like configuring a test, but a lot less options, right? And why is that? That's because we set a bunch of static values and we only had 2 dynamic values. And so we have to fill in the information for the dynamic values to start the test. And so with this, the clients, that's going to be the test agents. We need to select TA1 and TA2, they're ETH1 interfaces, and the port, that is the server port, defaults to 5000, but it can be whatever we need it to be. And then after that, we just simply have to click Start, and that will start the test just as any normal test. It just uses the template to create the test. And so you can see here that the test is beginning to start. And you can see here we're getting some information. We can see that we don't have any error seconds yet. That first stream is still kind of starting up, and it's going good. Things are looking good there. And this test is going to run for 30 seconds. And so it's going to run for a little bit of time, and things are looking good. This is exactly what we want to see. We don't have any loss. It's way lower than what we set in the thresholds, so things are looking good. And that test is now completing, and everything looks good. That template worked perfect for creating the test, and the test comes back with results showing that the service is working as expected. So that brings us to the end of this Learning Byte. In this Learning Byte, we demonstrate how to configure and use test templates. So as always, thanks for watching.
Visit the Juniper Education Services website to learn more about courses. View our full range of classroom, online, and e-learning courses. Learning paths, industry segment and technology-specific training paths. Juniper Networks Certification Program, the ultimate demonstration of your competence. And the training community, from forums to social media. Join the discussion.